first, Sharlene, thank you so much for doing this interview with me.
Thank you.
As we speak, International Women's Day is approaching us. What does that mean for you, especially for the organization that we're going to talk about that you are involved with?
I think that International Women's Day, I think, is an amazing opportunity for women of all walks of life to come together and celebrate being women and the achievements and accomplishments that women have gotten. I think that this is an interesting year, given the Me Too and Time's Up movements that are happening. I think that perhaps that IWD, International Women's Day, will take on a bit more of a meaning of to the point, right? Time is up. That this is now the time that we're not just having conversations, that we will actually see real change happen, and that the violence against women and sexual violence against women will be talked about but taken more seriously, and that the courts will be reflective of that as well. That people are going to stand up and start saying this is not okay, and it's not just coming from women, that our brothers out there will also be speaking up and standing up and holding their brothers accountable for their behavior. I think to an organization like Ernestines, and I think this morning I was driving into a really interesting workshop that I'm at today, and as I was driving in, I heard on the radio that a woman was murdered this morning in Mississauga. And it sounds like it was a domestic violence situation, and it kind of made me sad as we're approaching IWD, and that this is still happening. And so I know that as good as this is, that people are talking about these issues, and the awareness is there, we need to go fast. For me, I want it faster. I want it to happen more. I don't want my shelter to have to exist for another 30 or 40 years. I would like nothing better than to be out of a job, because violence against women and children and sexual violence is a thing of the past. Or for marginalized women, we service a lot of marginalized women. Again, like the things that are being talked about are wonderful things, but I do think that we need to look at it through lenses of women of color and disabled women and lesbian women and trans women, and that it's not just one group. It's not Hollywood. It's not just Hollywood stars, right? That's where the momentum is happening, and that's great. But let's be real, that a lot of this is happening to women who don't have those big names behind them or those voices behind them to support. Sorry, I probably talked all over the place.
No, you did not, but I think it's important too, because you kind of made mention, and I made mention too, an organization you're a part of. Can we talk a little bit about that? What it's called and what it's all about and how it's helping women and children?
So Ernestines is a 35-bed shelter for women and children fleeing violence. And the majority of our clients are, in fact, their children. So we have space for 15 women, and everybody else will be children. So we have anywhere from about 20 to 22 kids. And the programs and services that we are providing are immediate crisis intervention counseling for both women and their children, as well as legal support, our 24-hour counseling support, we have a child and youth program. We have a skills exchange program. We have a settlement worker program, because many of our women will have been in this country less than a year and came into Canada, and the violence escalated and started here. Often it did not start back home. It started here and it escalated here. And I'm just really happy that they're able to find us, because I do think there's way too many women who arrive here who don't know anything about the systems and the supports that are there for them, and that they are at greater risk of violence and death.
And I'm going to jump in because I want to, and I think this is important, especially what you just said. So I want to go over, who are the people that are coming to you? What do you see? What are the situations? And again, how do you help?
So for many of our women, if they're new to the country, they may not have been here for very long and are not aware. Perhaps the partner, he sponsored them, and then while they were here, the violence started or it escalated, and somewhere, whether she had to go to the hospital because there was an assault, or the police got called because there was assault, and she then learns about the shelter. and comes into the shelter, and we are there, we will have access to interpreters. If English is not her first language, we will do all the work we do with her will be in her mother tongue, so she can understand what her rights are, what she's entitled to, and how she can move and continue to live without being subjected to the violence that's been happening. So we'll help her with legal support. We'll go with her to court. We'll help her around access of her children, so that if she has custody of her kids, and how that works, and accessing the school system for her children and herself. Many women want to go back to school themselves, and we'll do that as well. We'll do the legal system with her. We'll provide her counseling. We will work with her to get a doctor, get the kids into school or childcare, and then work with her to get, and if immigration is what she is requiring as well, if there's further needs for immigration, we will access immigration lawyers and go through the process with her of obtaining her status without having him. Because likely if he sponsored her, there is risk of that sponsorship being broken down because of domestic violence. She shouldn't then have to leave, because this is now her home. Her children have likely been born here. They're Canadian children. And help her to be able to live a life free of violence in Canada and continue on. So help her access affordable housing, which is kind of an oxymoron in this city right now, because there isn't any affordable housing. So women used to be with they would stay in the shelter maybe 3 or 4 months. Now they're staying upwards of a year because there isn't affordable housing in this city. So they're staying with us longer. And in some ways, that's not a bad thing, because it does allow us, more opportunity and time to really work with the family. I mean, if they've been exposed to the violence, most of, the children in particular have been exposed to the violence most of their lives. And that's not going to get resolved and put away in just a couple of months. Like that can, some people remember that kind of stuff 30, 40 years down the road, and we want to make sure that they're getting the support and help that they need to grow and thrive, and that they're not going to grow up and become perpetrators, and that they're not going to grow up and be in abusive relationships. So there's a lot of work to do.
For those people who don't end up getting help, what has been the worst scenario that you've seen, or what could happen?
They die. They're murdered. We have had clients. We had a client murdered many years ago, and that was, I think, the most horrific thing to go through as an agency. And she had been with us, and he found her with us. And so when that happens, when a woman is located at an agency, we need to move her to another shelter, which we did. And then from that shelter, we were able to get her safe and affordable housing. But what ended up happening was that he was able to access his children. And even if we argue with, we will support and advocate with the courts that the access be supervised. In this particular instance, the judge disagreed and allowed him to go to her new home to pick up the children. And in the process of doing that, he stabbed her to death repeatedly in front of his children.
That's horrible. For those who are listening to this interview and they want to get help but they're scared, what do you suggest? What process can they do to make sure that they can reach you and, reach you safely? What can they do?
I would encourage them to call our crisis line, which is 416-746-3701. They can also call the Assaulted Women's Helpline. Sorry, I don't know that number off by heart. I should, but I don't. But they can look up the Assaulted Women's Helpline online, and they can see and they can find their number, and they will absolutely help them. They can also call Toronto's 311, and they will also ask for a violence against women shelter. There are many shelters in the city. Many of them are homeless. There aren't as many violence against women shelters, but there are about 14 of us. Violence against women shelters across the city, and they can ask for a number to any of the shelters. If they are at the hospital should also be able to provide them that support. If they have police involved, the police can also help them access the shelter. And that if they get into a shelter, it will be they will see their lives change. And I know a lot of women are very scared about going into a shelter, or feel that a shelter is not somewhere that they want to be. And I think a lot of that has to do more with I think, society's preconceptions of what a shelter is. But honestly, we are a house. They have their own bedrooms with their children. We have a cook on site. We have 24-hour access to counseling and support. There is clothing banks. There's food banks. There's all kinds of services that are there. And having somebody to talk to 24 hours a day. And if they don't want to come into a shelter, they can access an outreach program in a shelter, a transitional support worker who will work with them. If they decide at a later date they want to come into the shelter, then they're connected. But if they don't want to, there's somebody they can talk to before even coming. You know, if they decide they don't want to come into a shelter, there's still women who work in the shelter that are there to help and speak with them, even if they don't live in the shelter, and can provide them support and services and advocate for them with issues of legal or housing and counseling and other services that they need. There is a lot that is available, and, you know, this government just made an announcement last week that there is going to be millions of dollars towards gender-based violence and supports to women who are experiencing gender-based violence. I think that's an amazing step that the government is taking. I think it's long overdue, and you know, I applaud the government for doing it. And we'll see how that goes as well. But I think women should know that there's help. There's a lot of stuff for them now.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much.
And if you want to support Ernestines further, we are having our annual event. Can I speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. So
yeah.
There's an event coming up.
There's an event coming up, the Ernestine Fair, on April 11th at the Carlou. Wednesday, April 11th at the Carlou, and it is a sit-down dinner and a live and silent auction, and we have the wonderful Sharon Lewis, Canadian director, actor, writer, hosting for us. We're thrilled about that, and the proceeds raised from that evening will come and support Ernestine's programs and services.
So one more time, where can we get tickets and more info on this?
Again, you can go to our website at www.ernestines.ca.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.
But more importantly, thank you so much for what you're doing to help women.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time. We need the allies of the men in our lives.